Hi guys, very welcome to Mentor and yet another Halloween special of Mentor Pilot. I hope you're all doing well and that you're not watching this alone. Today, in true Halloween fashion, I'll be talking a little bit about the sometimes paranormal stories that have been leaking out in the aviation industry from different flights, different accidents, different disasters. And the first one I want to tell you about is reported from an unknown airline flying a transatlantic flight over from London to the United States, to New York. This was reported by a cabin crew member who was in her duty was supposed to go down into the crew bunk, which is a specific area where the flight and cabin crew can go to rest during a long-haul flight. And when she entered the stairwell to go down into this area, she found a man sitting on the stairwell. And she immediately asked the man what he was doing there, because he had no right to be. This is a restricted area. And the man looked up at her and said that he was worried about his wife that she was traveling with, and he gave the cabin crew her seat number. And the cabin crew said that she was going to go up and talk to his wife, but that he was not allowed to be there. So the man went up, walked up the stairwell, and went into one of the toilets on board. The cabin crew proceeded to go up to the seat that the man had said, and found a woman sitting there. But when she asked the woman and said that her husband was worried about her, the woman just looked at her and said, "I am not traveling with my husband." "Well, I kind of am. I'm bringing his body and his coffin back to be buried in New York." When the cabin crew went back to check on the toilet, there was no one there. And she also checked with the captain, and they were indeed carrying human remains in the cargo hold. Another story that you have to talk about when we're talking about these kind of circumstances is Flight 401. This is an Eastern Airlines flight that crashed into the Everglades. The crash was caused because all three flight crew members, it was the captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer, got preoccupied with looking at an indication that the nose gear was not down and locked. In all likelihood, this was due to a bulb that wasn't working, but all flight crew members were looking at that, and they entered a holding pattern to try to solve the problem out. And at some point during that holding pattern, one of the pilots most likely inadvertently pushed the control wheel that sent the aircraft out of altitude hold and into a very shallow descent. Because of the lack of warnings in the autopilot system, none of the flight crew members realized this until it was too late, and the aircraft crashed into the Everglades. 101 people perished in that accident, together with the three flight crew members. Because the aircraft had crashed into the swamp, part of the aircraft was actually fairly intact. So the airline decided to salvage some of the parts and refit them into the existing TriStar fleet. And it's when they did that some very, very strange things started happening. On one occasion, a flight engineer that was starting to get the aircraft ready for flight heard a knocking sound from the E&E bay, which is located in the cockpit below a hatch. And he thought it might be some kind of mechanical malfunction with the aircraft, so he went over there and he opened the hatch. And inside of the hatch was the perished flight engineer from Flight 401 sitting hunched down, looking up at him. And while the engineer was looking at this apparition, the apparition said, "You should have a look at this." and then vanished into thin air. So this obviously made the flight engineer very distraught, but he did go down and he did check into the E&E bay, and they did find a fairly significant malfunction that could have had some really, really bad impacts on the flight if they would have taken off. On a different occasion, a passenger called the attention of the cabin crew because she was worried about the person sitting next to her by the overwing exits. It was a person sitting in full flight uniform, looking very distant and very lifeless, staring out into the distance. The cabin crew that was called to the scene immediately recognized the flight engineer from Flight 401. And while they were both looking at him, he just disappeared into thin air. This made the passenger so distraught that she actually had a panic attack there and then. And there are many, many accounts like this. They're all accounts seen by multiple witnesses, even reported. Almost all of these have been reported in safety reports to the FAA, so they are on public record. It went so far that the airline started threatening people with disciplinary action if they continued to tell these stories or report these kind of events. And secretly, while doing this, they started removing the salvage parts from the downed aircrafts. And when all of the parts were removed, these apparitions suddenly stopped. So, as you can see, there are quite a few things, and there are many, many more things than this that can be well told in a special Halloween episode. So for now, I hope you all have a nice evening, and I'll see you next time. Happy Halloween. Bye bye.